The fluorescent lights of Cincinnati General Hospital's emergency department hummed with that particular frequency that made the back of your teeth ache after 12 hours. It was 3 in the morning, that dead zone when the drunks had been stitched up and discharged. But the heart attacks hadn't started yet. Kira Ashford's hands moved with mechanical precision, suturing a laceration on a construction worker's forearm. 32 years old, red hair pulled back in a regulation bun, green eyes that looked perpetually tired. She wore the same pale blue scrubs as every other nurse in the trauma bay. Nothing about her suggested anything other than competence, bordering on boredom. But her hands told a different story. They moved too fast, too sure. The needle driver clicked through tissue with the rhythm of someone who'd sewn flesh back together in places where the lights didn't work, and the screaming never stopped. "All set, Mr. Patterson," she said, her voice flat, professional. "Keep it dry for 48 hours. Follow up with your primary care." The construction worker nodded, already half asleep from the lidocaine and exhaustion. Kira stripped off her gloves, dropped them in the biohazard bin, and checked her watch. 2 hours and 47 minutes left on her shift. Then her phone buzzed. The screen showed a number with a 703 area code, Northern Virginia. She stared at it for 3 full seconds before her thumb moved to answer. "Ashford," she said quietly, walking toward the supply closet where nobody could hear. "Miss Ashford, this is Catherine Reynolds, Department of Defense Contractor Relations." The voice was crisp, bureaucratic, the kind that had made 10,000 calls just like this. "We have an urgent medical support contract, 72 hours, classified location, $75,000. Are you available?" Kira's jaw tightened. She'd been out for 3 years. 3 years of night shifts and vending machine coffee, and deliberately not thinking about the things she used to do in the dark. "What's the classification level?" "Need to know. OCONUS deployment. You'll be supporting a small tactical unit. Standard trauma support protocols. Low-risk environment." Low risk. That's what they always said right before everything went to hell. "I'll need 24 hours to—" "We need an answer in 30 minutes, Miss Ashford. The contract activates in 6 hours. You'll be wheels up from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base at 0900. Kira closed her eyes. $75,000 would cover her student loans, with enough left over for 6 months of rent. And it was just 3 days. Just medical support, no weapons, no combat, just keeping someone alive long enough to get them home. "I'm in," she heard herself say. "Outstanding. You'll receive coordinates via secure text. Bring only what you need for 3 days. Everything else will be provided." The line went dead. Kira stood in the supply closet, surrounded by boxes of gauze and IV tubing, and felt the tremor start in her hands. It was subtle, barely visible, but she recognized it. The same tremor that had taken 6 months to stop after Juarez. She went home, but she didn't sleep. Her apartment was what real estate agents called cozy, and normal people called depressingly small. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchenette that was really just a hot plate and a mini fridge. The furniture was from IKEA, still flat-packed in her mind, temporary even after 2 years. There were no photographs on the walls, no artwork, no personality. It looked like a hotel room occupied by someone who'd given up on the idea of ever going home. Kira knelt beside her bed and pulled out a steel lockbox. She hadn't opened it in 473 days. She knew the exact count because every morning she woke up and thought about opening it, and every morning she decided not to. The combination clicked. Inside, a folded black uniform with no insignia, a Glock 19 wrapped in an oiled cloth, 3 magazines, a combat knife with a 7-inch blade, and a single Polaroid photograph. The photo showed 2 people, a woman with red hair and sharp green eyes, maybe 25 years old, wearing the same black uniform. Beside her, a man, maybe 35, with the kind of face that looked carved from granite. Both of them were trying not to smile and failing. On the back, written in faded ballpoint pen, Wraith and Griffin, Juarez, 2008, trust no one. The photograph was torn clean in half, right through the middle, through the man's chest. Kira had torn it herself 3 years ago when the casualty report came through. When the CIA liaison had sat in her debriefing room and told her that Julian Graves was dead, captured by cartel enforcers during the exfiltration from Juarez, executed, and his body had been identified through dental records. She'd believed them because she'd wanted to believe them. Because believing Julian was dead was easier than believing she'd left him behind to save herself. Kira picked up the Glock, checked the chamber out of habit, and set it back down. She wasn't bringing it. This was medical support, low risk. She was a nurse now, not an operator. The only thing she was shooting these days was lidocaine into construction workers. But she did pack something else. From the bottom of the box, she pulled out a thread-on suppressor wrapped in oil-stained cloth. Military grade, the kind you didn't acquire through normal channels. She stared at it for a long moment, then tucked it into the bottom of her medical ruck, beneath the bandages and tourniquets, just in case. She closed the box, locked it, slid it back under the bed, but she kept the photograph. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was a sprawling complex of hangars and runways carved into the Ohio farmland. Kira arrived at 0830, showed her ID at 3 different checkpoints, and was directed to a hangar at the far end of the flight line. Inside, a UH-60 Black Hawk sat with its rotors already turning. The side door was open, and she could see 4 men in full combat gear, their faces obscured by helmets and sunglasses. A man in his late 50s stood beside the helicopter, arms crossed, watching her approach. He was maybe 6'2", built like a middle linebacker who'd kept in shape through sheer spite. His fatigues had no name tape, no unit patch, just a small American flag on the shoulder. Gray hair cropped close to his skull, eyes the color of old ice. "Miss Ashford?" His voice had the texture of gravel being chewed. "That's me. Chief Garrett Stone. I'm the tactical advisor for this operation." He looked her up and down, not with condescension, but with the assessment of someone who'd spent 30 years evaluating whether people would break under pressure. "You're the medical contractor?" "Trauma nurse, 8 years civilian, 4 years Army Reserve before that." "Reserve." He said it like it was a type of wine he didn't drink. "When's the last time you worked under fire?" "I haven't." Stone's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. "Let me be clear, Miss Ashford. We're going into a hot zone. If someone goes down, I need you to keep them breathing long enough for us to exfil. That's your only job. You don't touch a weapon. You don't make tactical decisions. You stay low, you stay quiet, and you let us do our jobs. Understood?" Kira met his eyes, held them. "Understood, Chief." "Good." He gestured toward the helicopter. "Load up. We're burning daylight." She climbed into the Black Hawk's troop compartment. The 4 men in combat gear shifted to make room, but barely. The interior smelled like hydraulic fluid, gun oil, and the particular musk of nervous men pretending not to be nervous. The man closest to her was massive, maybe 6'4", skin dark as wet earth, with shoulders that suggested he could bench press the helicopter if properly motivated. His name tape read, "Hale." "You're the nurse?" His voice had a slight southern drawl, Alabama or maybe Georgia. "That's me." "Well, darling, just stay behind us big boys and you'll be fine. If you hear loud noises, cover those pretty ears." He grinned, showing teeth too white to be natural. The man across from him, younger, maybe 28, with the lean build of a distance runner, rolled his eyes. His name tape read, "Bennett. Ignore Marcus. He thinks he's funny." "I am funny, Tyler. Ask your mom." "My mom's dead, asshole." "Then ask your dad." Despite everything, despite the fear coiling in her gut, Kira felt a smile tug at the corner of her mouth. It was the kind of banter that happened in every military unit she'd ever known. The jokes that kept the fear at bay, the camaraderie built on shared misery and dark humor. Chief Stone climbed in last, settling into the seat beside Kira. He pulled on a headset, keyed the mic, and said something to the pilots that she couldn't hear over the rotor wash. The Black Hawk lurched into the air. 2 hours into the flight, somewhere over the Atlantic, Stone leaned close to Kira. He'd removed his sunglasses, and she could see the crow's feet etched deep around his eyes. The kind that came from squinting into too many sunrises in too many deserts. "You've been briefed on the target?" "Just that it's medical support for an extraction." Stone nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer and found it insufficient. "We're going into Afghanistan, Kunar province, near the Pakistani border. There's a warlord, Ahmad Massoud, who's been feeding us intel on Taliban positions for 18 months. 3 days ago, his own people turned on him, shot him twice in the gut during a meeting. He's bleeding out in a compound in the middle of nowhere, and if he dies, we lose our entire intelligence network in the region. So we're extracting him. That's the plan. CIA wants him alive. Our job is to go in, secure the compound, and keep him breathing long enough to get him to Bagram airfield. You're there to stabilize him for transport." Kira nodded. It was a straightforward mission, the kind she'd done a dozen times in her old life, back when she wore a different uniform and answered to a different name. "Intel says there's 12 to 15 guards at the compound," Stone continued. "Local fighters, poorly trained, probably high on hash. We go in fast, secure the perimeter, and get out before anyone knows we're there. Wheels up to wheels down, 90 minutes. And if the intel's wrong?" Stone's expression hardened. "Then you stay behind us and pray we're as good as advertised." He turned away, ending the conversation. Kira looked down at her hands. They were steady now, the tremor gone. Muscle memory, maybe, or just the old training asserting itself. She flexed her right hand, felt a slight callus on the inside of her index finger, right where it would rest against a rifle's trigger. She looked up and found Stone watching her. His eyes flicked to her hand, then back to her face. Something passed between them, unspoken but understood. He knew. Somehow this gray-haired chief with the weathered face and the ice-chip eyes knew that she was more than just a trauma nurse with a reserve commission. He didn't say anything, didn't call her out, just gave the smallest nod and looked away. Kira felt her heart rate kick up, not from fear, from something else. Something she'd tried to bury 3 years ago, under 12-hour shifts in vending machine coffee. Recognition. The Black Hawk descended into Kunar province as the sun hit its zenith. Below, the landscape was a nightmare of gray mountains and brown valleys, everything sharp-edged and hostile, the kind of place where empires came to die. The pilots came over the intercom. 2 minutes to LZ, buckle up and lock in. The men around Kira transformed. The jokes stopped. The easy banter evaporated. They became something else. Focused, predatory. Marcus Hale checked his M249 squad automatic weapon, a beast of a machine gun that looked like it could saw through a car. Tyler Bennett adjusted the scope on his Mark 12 designated marksman rifle, the movements so practiced they looked like prayer. Chief Stone pulled on his helmet, flipped down his night vision mount, and keyed his mic. "Eyes on me. Intel says the LZ is cold. But Intel also said there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, so trust nothing. We drop, we secure, we extract, fast and surgical." He paused, his eyes finding Kira. "And watch the package. Miss Ashford is non-combatant. If she takes so much as a splinter, command will have my retirement papers. Bennett, you're on babysitting duty." "Copy that, Chief," Tyler said, though his tone suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Kira wanted to say something, wanted to tell them she didn't need a babysitter, that she'd been in more firefights than half the operators she'd known, that the tremor in her hands was from trying to suppress who she used to be, not from fear. But she didn't, because Kira Ashford, trauma nurse, wouldn't say those things. Kira Ashford didn't know what it felt like to shoot someone from 600 yards away and watch them drop like a puppet with cut strings. Only Wraith knew that, and Wraith was dead. 30 seconds. The helicopter banked hard, descending into a narrow valley. Kira could see the compound now, a cluster of mud brick buildings surrounded by a low wall. Dust rose in clouds as the Black Hawk's rotors beat the air. "LZ looks clear," the pilot shouted. "No movement, no heat signatures." Stone's voice was calm. "Good, too good. Stay sharp." The Black Hawk flared, tail dropping, and then they were down, the skids hitting dirt with a jolt that rattled Kira's teeth. The side doors slid open, and the seals poured out in a fluid motion that spoke to thousands of hours of training. Kira unbuckled, grabbed her medical ruck, and jumped down after them. The heat hit her like a physical force. Afghanistan in summer was a different kind of hell. The air so dry it burned your lungs. The sun a white disk that bleached all color from the world. The compound's walls were pockmarked with bullet holes, old scars from battles she'd never know about. Marcus Hale moved to the left, his saw up and scanning. Tyler Bennett moved right, covering a different sector. Stone advanced toward the main building, his rifle tucked into his shoulder, smooth and professional. Kira stayed behind them, her hands gripping the straps of her medical ruck. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Then the world exploded. The RPG came from the cliff wall to the east, a streak of white smoke in fury. It hit the Black Hawk's tail rotor, and the explosion was a sound that didn't belong in nature. Metal screaming as it tore apart. The helicopter spun, once, twice, the pilots fighting for control. The tail section separated, spiraling away in a shower of sparks. "Abort! Abort!" Stone's voice, raw with urgency. But there was nowhere to abort to. The Black Hawk tilted, the world becoming a kaleidoscope of brown earth and blue sky, and then it dropped. The impact wasn't a crash, it was a statement. The helicopter hit the compound courtyard nose first, the front rotor disintegrating in a blossom of shrapnel. Kira was thrown forward, her seatbelt the only thing preventing her from becoming a smear on the bulkhead. Darkness, ringing in her ears, the taste of copper. She opened her eyes. The world was sideways, smoke pouring through the cabin. Her seatbelt had locked, holding her suspended at an angle that made her shoulders scream. She could hear someone groaning, low and animal. "Sound off!" Stone's voice, distant, muffled. "Status!" "I'm up." Marcus, somewhere to her right. "Pilot's dead." Tyler, his voice shaking. "Co-pilot's unconscious." "Chief, my leg, I can't." "Bennett, stay down. I'm coming to you." Gunfire. The sudden crack, crack, crack of AK-47s, unmistakable. And then the deeper, heavier thud of a belt-fed machine gun. They were in a kill box. Kira's hands moved on autopilot. Seatbelt release. She dropped, hit the deck hard, her medical ruck cushioning the fall. Smoke everywhere, thick and acrid, burning her eyes and throat. She crawled forward toward the light. The helicopter's side door had been torn open, metal peeling back like a sardine can. She could see daylight, dust, the shapes of men running. A hand grabbed her ankle. She kicked, pure reflex, and heard a groan. The co-pilot. He was pinned under a crate, his face gray, lips blue. Tension pneumothorax. His chest wasn't moving right, one side collapsed. Kira didn't think. She grabbed the collar of his flight suit and pulled. He outweighed her by 80 pounds, but she'd been taught how to drag a body in full gear, how to use your legs and core in sheer desperation. Bullets snapped overhead, kicking up dirt in geysers. She kept pulling, dragging him toward a concrete barrier 20 feet away. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel. The barrier. Just get to the barrier. Marcus Hale materialized beside her, his saw roaring, laying down suppressive fire. "Go, go, go!" She reached the barrier, dropped behind it, and immediately went to work. The co-pilot's flight suit ripped open, ribs exposed, second intercostal space. She had a 14-gauge needle in her hand before she consciously decided to grab it. The needle punched through skin, muscle, pleura, a hiss of escaping air. The co-pilot gasped, his color returning from gray to pink. "You're okay," Kira heard herself say. "You're okay, stay with me." Stone slid in beside her, his face streaked with dust and blood. "You good?" "He's stable, but Chief, we're pinned. Where's—" "Tyler's down. Compound fracture, left femur. Pilot's KIA. We've got 40, maybe 50 hostiles. This wasn't 12 guards. This was a goddamn army." The .50 caliber machine gun opened up, and the concrete barrier started to disintegrate, chunks of it exploding into dust. They had maybe 30 seconds before the cover was gone, and they were all dead. Stone's rifle clicked empty. He reached for a magazine, found nothing. His eyes went wide. "I'm dry. Spare mags are in the bird, but we can't move. That 50 cal will cut us in half." Kira looked at the technical truck 200 yards away, the .50 caliber mounted in the bed, the gunner hunched behind the armored shield. The only target was a 4-inch slit. She looked at Stone. He looked back, and in that moment, they both knew what had to happen. "Stay here," Stone said, preparing to move. But Kira was already crawling toward Tyler Bennett. She found him 20 feet away, his face white with shock, his left leg bent at an angle that made her stomach clench. His MK-12 rifle lay beside him, still loaded. "Tyler," she said quietly, "I need your rifle." "What? No, you're—" She took it, checked the chamber, loaded, one in the pipe. The rifle was heavier than she remembered, or maybe her arms were just weaker after 3 years of bedpans and IV drips. "Ashford, get down!" Stone's voice, raw with panic. Kira ignored him. She reached into her medical ruck, past the bandages and tourniquets, to the bottom where she'd packed something that didn't belong in a trauma kit. The thread-on suppressor. Stone was beside her now, his hand on her shoulder. "What the hell is that?" She didn't answer. She spun the suppressor onto the Mark 12's barrel, the threads clicking home with muscle memory that should have atrophied, but hadn't. Her fingers found the scope turrets. Click, click, click. "Wind," she whispered to herself. "Full value, left to right, 12 miles per hour." She did the math in her head, the same math she'd done 100 times on ranges where the targets didn't bleed. 320 yards. The .50 caliber gunner was protected by the shield. Only his head was visible through the slit. 4 inches of target. Stone's voice was quiet now, not ordering, just asking, "Who are you?" Kira settled into the rifle, bipod on the rubble, shoulder driven into the stock, body bladed. The posture wasn't something you learned in nursing school. Her breathing shifted, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Pause. The world narrowed to the reticle, the gunner's head barely visible. She could see him moving, adjusting his aim, about to fire again. She exhaled halfway, held it, squeezed. The suppressed shot was a whisper in the chaos. Downrange, 320 yards away, the .50 caliber gunner's head snapped back. A pink mist. He slumped over the weapon. The heavy machine gun fell silent. Marcus Hale stopped shooting. Tyler Bennett stopped groaning. Stone stopped breathing. Kira cycled the bolt. Smooth, professional. She shifted her aim to the technical's cab. "Driver," she said. Her voice had changed. Lower, colder, the voice of someone else. "Squeeze." The driver slumped against the steering wheel. Kira lowered the rifle slightly, looked at Stone. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with recognition. "Chief," she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming something sharp and dangerous. "Secure the left flank. Hale, suppressive fire on that building. I'm moving Bennett to hard cover. We're going to that structure, 3 o'clock. Move. Now." It wasn't a request, it was a command. delivered with the authority of someone who'd given orders in worse situations than this. Stone stared at her for one more second. Then his training kicked in, overriding his shock. "You heard her," he barked. "Move out!" The chain of command had just been inverted. The nurse had become the operator. The civilian had revealed herself to be something else entirely. And as Marcus Hale laid down covering fire and Stone grabbed the co-pilot, Kira Ashford picked up Tyler Bennett like he weighed nothing and moved across the kill zone with the fluid grace of someone who'd done this before. Many times before. 20 yards of open ground. It might as well have been 20 miles. Rounds snapped past them, angry hornets searching for flesh. Dust geysers erupted at their feet. A bullet cracked through the air so close to Kira's head that she felt the pressure wave. She didn't flinch, didn't slow. She moved in a combat crouch, the Mark 12 in one hand, Tyler's weight distributed across her shoulders. When a fighter appeared from behind a burned-out sedan, raising an AK-47, Kiera fired twice without breaking stride. The fighter dropped. Marcus saw it happen. His eyes went wide behind his shooting glasses. They crashed through the rotting wooden door of a mud brick compound. Inside it was dark and smelled of old tobacco and goats. Kiera swept her sector, rifle up, scanning for threats. "Clear left! Clear right!" Marcus echoed. Stone dumped the co-pilot in a corner, spun around with his rifle raised. "Barricade that entrance!" Tyler was already moving, despite his broken leg, dragging furniture to block the door. Kira set him down gently and immediately went to work on his leg. "Morphine," she said, ripping open her med kit. Her hands, which had just killed 3 men with surgical precision, were now gentle, careful. "This is going to hurt." She didn't wait for permission. The syrette went into Tyler's thigh. Then she grabbed his leg above the fracture site and with one brutal jerk, realigned the bone. Tyler screamed into the roll of gauze she'd shoved in his mouth. His body arched off the floor. Then he slumped back, panting, tears streaming down his face. "You're good," Kira said quietly. "You're good, Bennett. Bones set. You're going to walk again." Stone was standing over her now. The shock had worn off, replaced by cold, hard suspicion. His .45 pistol was in his hand, not quite pointed at her, but not quite pointed away either. "Talk," he said. His voice was low, dangerous. "Right now, who the hell are you?" Kira finished wrapping the splint, checked Tyler's pulse, wiped the blood from her hands onto her pants. Only then did she look up. The fluorescent lights of Cincinnati General felt like a lifetime ago. "My name is Kira Ashford," she said. "I'm 32 years old. I have a BSN from Johns Hopkins. I'm a registered trauma nurse." Stone's hand tightened on the pistol. And from 2005 to 2008, I was an Army Ranger. After that, I was recruited into the Intelligence Support Activity, Task Force Ghost, call sign Wraith. Marcus Hale, who'd been piling broken furniture against the door, froze. "Wraith? Holy shit. I heard stories about a female operator working the Mexican border. They said she took down the Zeta's entire command structure in Nuevo Laredo." "Stories get exaggerated," Kira said. "I didn't work alone." "Usually." Stone holstered his pistol, but his eyes never left her face. "ISA, that's the ghosts. The ones who go in before SEALs, before Delta, to prep the battlefield. That's us. Why the hell are you here wearing scrubs and pretending to be a civilian?" Kira stood up, checked the load on the MK-12, moved to the window and peered through a crack in the shutters. Outside, she could see fighters massing, maybe 60 of them, converging on their position. "Because I retired, Chief." Her voice was flat, empty. "I got tired of the killing. I wanted to save people instead. Took this contract because it was supposed to be a milk run. In and out. No complications." She looked back at him. Her green eyes were hard now, all traces of the tired nurse gone. "But war has a funny way of finding you, doesn't it? A mortar round impacted the street outside, close enough to shake dust from the ceiling. The building shuddered. "They're bracketing us," Kira noted, her voice devoid of fear. "They know we're in here. That technical was just the scouting element. Main force is coming, and they have indirect fire support." Stone assessed their situation with 30 years of combat experience. One dead pilot, one unconscious co-pilot who'd need constant monitoring, Tyler Bennett with a broken leg, combat ineffective, Marcus Hale down to his last belt of ammunition, and himself with a twisted ankle that was already swelling inside his boot. "We need air support," Stone said, "but comms are jammed. I can't raise Bagram, can't raise CENTCOM. We're black on communications." "They're not jammed," Kira corrected. She was still looking out the window, her mind processing tactical data. "They're using a localized frequency hopper to drown us out. I can see the antenna array on the roof of that two-story building, 400 yards east. As long as that jammer is active, no CAS, no extraction. We're ghosts." Stone stared at her. "How do you know that?" "Because I taught the course on counterinsurgency electronic warfare at Fort Bragg." She turned to face him. "Someone has to go take out that jammer. And since Tyler can't walk, Marcus is your heavy gun. And you need to protect the wounded if we're overrun. That leaves me." "No." Stone's response was immediate, instinctive. "I can't let a civilian—" "I'm not a civilian right now, Garrett." She used his first name for the first time, and it hit him like a slap. "I'm the most qualified asset you have. You hold this position. I kill the jammer. Then we get our ride home." Stone stared at her. Every instinct he had as a protector, as a chief, as someone who'd spent 3 decades keeping his people alive, screamed at him to refuse, to go himself, to not send a woman he'd met 6 hours ago into a battlefield alone. But he looked at Tyler, pale and sweating on the floor. He looked at the co-pilot, who'd need constant monitoring. He looked at his own ankle, swollen to twice its normal size. And he looked at Kira Ashford, who just made 2 impossible shots under fire and moved like she'd been born in a war zone. "20 minutes, he said finally, pulling his last fragmentation grenade from his vest. He handed it to her. "After that, we're overrun. They'll come through that door, and there won't be anything I can do to stop them." Kira took the grenade, checked the fuse. A grim smile touched her lips, and for a moment Stone saw the woman she used to be. The ghost who'd haunted cartel safe houses and left only bodies behind. 20 minutes is a lifetime, Chief," she said. "Keep the tea warm." Then she was gone, slipping out the back window into the narrow alleyway, and Stone was left with the realization that he'd just sent a nurse into a firefight and somehow felt better about their odds of survival. Because she wasn't a nurse. Not anymore. Wraith had come back from the dead, and God help anyone who stood in her way. The alleyway behind the compound was a ribbon of shadow squeezed between mud brick walls, barely wide enough for Kira's shoulders. The moment her boots hit the dirt, something fundamental shifted in her posture. The nurse persona didn't just fade, it evaporated like water on hot stone. She moved differently now, not walking, but flowing, her body remembering patterns that 3 years of hospital corridors had tried to erase. Check corners, scan roof lines, listen for the change in ambient noise that meant someone was about to die. The Mark 12 rifle felt right in her hands. Too right. Like greeting an old friend you'd sworn never to see again. She had 3 magazines, 60 rounds total. Not enough for a firefight, but then again, she wasn't planning a firefight. She was planning a hunt. The heat was suffocating, the Afghan sun turning the alley into a convection oven. Sweat ran down her spine, soaked into her scrubs. But her mind was ice cold, calculating angles and distances, threat assessments, and probability matrices. The math of violence, precise as surgery. The enemy fighters were loud. She could hear them shouting to each other in Pashto, coordinating their assault on Stone's position. They were undisciplined, eager, smelling victory. They thought the Americans were trapped, wounded, waiting to die. They were right about two of those things. Kira reached an intersection where three alleys met. She pressed herself into a doorway, breathing shallow, listening. Footsteps. Four men, moving fast, weapons clanking against their gear. A patrol sweeping the perimeter. She waited. They passed within 10 feet of her, so close she could smell the hashish smoke clinging to their clothes. Four fighters, AK-47s slung loose, talking among themselves. Relaxed, confident. The last man was a straggler, lagging behind his companions, pausing to light a cigarette. Kira moved. Her left hand clamped over his mouth before he could scream. Her right hand drove the combat knife into the base of his skull, angled upward, severing the brainstem. He went limp instantly, a puppet with cut strings. She dragged him into the shadows, wiped the blade on his shirt. The whole thing took 4 seconds. The other three fighters kept walking, oblivious. Kira stood over the body for a moment, looking down at what she'd done. This was the work that had driven her to nursing school, the brutal calculus of taking a life to save lives. She'd told herself she was done with this, that the blood could be washed away with enough night shifts and enough patients saved. But here, in this alley, in this dying compound, she understood the truth. You never washed away blood. You just learned to live with the stains. She kept moving. The water tower loomed ahead, a Soviet-era concrete structure that had somehow survived 4 decades of war. 2 stories tall, the tallest building in the compound. On the roof, she could see the communications array, a cluster of antennas in dishes. And beside it, 2 guards, silhouetted against the blue sky. The front entrance was guarded by a heavy machine gun nest. 4 men, dug in, covering the main approach. No way through there. She circled the building. On the north wall, a drain pipe, rusted and precarious, led to a second-floor balcony. It looked like it might collapse if she breathed on it too hard. Kira slung the rifle across her back and began to climb. The metal groaned under her weight. Rust flaked off in orange clouds. 20 feet up, a bracket pulled free from the wall with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. She swung, caught herself with one hand, her shoulder screaming in protest. Don't look down. Don't think about falling. Just climb. Her fingers found the balcony railing. She pulled herself up and over, landing silently on the concrete. Inside the building, she could hear voices. Radio chatter. The enemy commander directing his forces. The hallway was empty, but doors lined both sides, any one of them potentially hiding fighters. She moved slowly, rifle up, clearing each doorway with controlled aggression. Empty. Empty. Storage room with old ammunition crates. Empty. At the end of the hall, a stairwell led up to the roof, and beside it, an open door. Inside, 2 men sat at a table, smoking, their AK-47s leaning against the wall. Between them, a radio setup. Not the jammer itself, but the control node. Kiera didn't hesitate. She stepped into the doorway, rifle to her shoulder, and fired. 4 shots. 2 seconds. Both men slumped forward onto the table, their cigarettes still burning. She moved to the bodies, checking for intelligence. On the table was a map, detailed, showing terrain features she recognized. The compound, the crash site, and marked in red ink, a flight path. The exact route their Black Hawk had taken. They'd known. Someone had told them exactly where to set up the ambush, exactly when to fire. This wasn't a rescue gone wrong. This was a planned kill operation. Kira pulled out her phone, took photos of the map, and sent them to Stone's number. No message. The images would speak for themselves. The radio crackled to life. A voice speaking English with an American accent. Griffin to Vulture Actual. Wraith is in the valley. Repeat, target is confirmed in AO. Proceed to phase 2. Kira's blood turned to ice. Griffin. Julian's call sign. She grabbed the radio handset, but the transmission had already ended. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the shock of hearing a ghost speak. Julian Graves was supposed to be dead, killed by cartel enforcers in 2008. She'd seen the casualty report. She'd attended the memorial service at Arlington, watched them fold the flag and present it to his mother. But that voice, she'd know it anywhere. The slight rasp from too many cigarettes. The flat, emotionless tone of someone who'd been trained to deliver bad news without flinching. He was alive, and he was here. And somehow, impossibly, he was working with the people trying to kill her. Kira's phone buzzed. A text from Stone. Single word. Hurry. She shook off the shock. Compartmentalize. Deal with the mission first. Process the emotional trauma later, preferably with a therapist and a lot of whiskey. She ran to the stairs and burst onto the roof. The two guards turned, surprised to see a woman in bloody scrubs charging at them. That surprise cost them their lives. Kira dropped to a knee and fired. The first guard went down. The second guard opened up on full auto, bullets stitching the air above her head. She felt the tug on her sleeve as a round passed through the fabric, grazing her tricep. Hot blood, sharp pain. She ignored it. Breathe. Sight picture. Squeeze. The second guard fell. Kira scrambled to the jammer, a military-grade frequency hopper connected to a car battery and a long whip antenna. She didn't know how to disable it properly, and she didn't have time to figure it out. She pulled the pin on Stone's fragmentation grenade and wedged it between the battery and the transmitter housing. "Fire in the hole," she whispered to no one. Then she sprinted for the edge of the roof and vaulted off, aiming for a pile of sandbags 30 feet below. The explosion came as she was in midair. The concussion wave hit her like a physical punch, spinning her in space. She hit the sandbags hard, rolled, came up gasping. Metal and plastic rained down around her, pieces of the destroyed jammer clattering on the rooftops. The jamming signal died instantly, and suddenly the airwaves were clear again. Kira tapped her earpiece, the one she'd taken from the co-pilot's flight helmet during the crash. "Bravo Actual, this is Ashford. Jammer is down. Call the cavalry." Static. Then Stone's voice, rough with relief. "Copy that, Ashford. Good work. Air support is spinning up. ETA 12 minutes. Can you make it back?" "On my way." But as she stood up, clutching her bleeding arm, a shadow fell across her. She turned. A man stood in the doorway of the water tower, silhouetted against the interior darkness. He wasn't wearing the hodgepodge gear of the local fighters. He had proper tactical equipment. American-made plate carrier, ballistic helmet, suppressed M4 carbine. He moved with the fluid grace of a professional, not a militia fighter high on ideology and hash. He was Western, and he was staring at her with the kind of recognition that meant he knew exactly who she was. "Well," the man said, his voice carrying a slight British accent, "you've been a busy little bee, haven't you?" Kira raised her rifle, clicked the trigger. Nothing. Empty magazine. She'd burned through all 60 rounds. She reached for her sidearm and realized she didn't have one. She'd left the Glock in Ohio, in a lockbox under her bed, because this was supposed to be a low-risk medical contract. The mercenary raised his weapon. "End of the line, darling." Kira looked at the barrel of his carbine, looked at his finger on the trigger, calculated her odds of closing the distance before he fired. 0. Maybe less than 0. So she did the only thing she could do. She changed the threat assessment in his brain. She let her shoulders slump, dropped the empty rifle with a clatter, raised her hands, palms open, trembling. She widened her eyes, forced tears to well up, let her voice crack with fabricated hysteria. "Please," she sobbed, "I'm just a contractor. I just wanted the money. I didn't know it would be like this. Please don't kill me." The mercenary blinked. For a fraction of a second, the predator in him relaxed. His threat assessment downgraded her from operator to terrified civilian. His weapon lowered 2 inches. A smirk curled his lip. "Pathetic," he said. "I thought you were—" 2 inches was all she needed. Kira didn't lunge forward. She dropped. Her boot lashed out, connecting with a sandbag at her feet, sending a cloud of grit and dust exploding into his face. Bang! The mercenary fired blind, bullets snapping through the air where her head had been a microsecond before. Kira rolled forward, coming up inside his guard. She didn't go for his gun, she went for his throat. The heel of her palm drove into his chin, snapping his head back. He grunted, stumbled, but his grip on the rifle held. He swung the buttstock around like a club. It caught Kira in the ribs. She felt something crack, tasted blood. The pain was blinding, white-hot, stealing her breath. She hit the ground hard. The mercenary shook the dust from his eyes, cursing in British accented profanity that would have made a sailor blush. He racked the bolt of his weapon, chambering a fresh round. "You little witch!" He aimed down at her chest, point-blank range. No missing this time. Kira's hand found a piece of rebar protruding from the broken concrete, jagged and rust-red. As his finger tightened on the trigger, she swung the metal rod with every ounce of strength she had left. The rebar connected with his knee. The sound of the patella shattering was louder than the gunfire echoing through the valley. The mercenary howled, his leg buckling. He collapsed sideways, and his rifle skittered across the roof. Now it was a scramble. Two wolves in the dirt, both wounded, both desperate. Kira launched herself onto him. He was stronger, heavier, trained in the same close-quarters combat she was. He punched her in the face, a heavy blow that filled her vision with stars. She tasted copper and dust. He wrapped his hands around her throat, squeezing, his thumbs digging into her windpipe. "Die!" he spat, his face inches from hers. Kira's vision began to tunnel. Black spots danced at the edges of her sight. She clawed at his face, but he didn't flinch. His grip was iron, professional. He'd done this before. Think. Her training screamed at her through the oxygen deprivation. Anatomy, leverage, weakness. She stopped fighting his hands. Instead, she reached down to her belt, fumbling for the trauma shears, the heavy-duty scissors that could cut through Kevlar in combat boots. Her fingers found the handle. She didn't stab him in the chest. The plate carrier would stop it. She didn't go for the neck. His chin was tucked, protecting the carotid. She jammed the shears downward into the soft junction where the thigh meets the hip, the femoral triangle. The mercenary's eyes went wide. His grip on her throat vanished instantly. He let out a gurgling gasp, rolling off her, clutching his leg. Bright arterial blood spurted between his fingers, pulsing in time with his dying heart. A high-pressure hose. He had maybe 60 seconds before he bled out. Kira rolled away, gasping for air, coughing violently. She lay there for a moment, staring at the blue sky, listening to the war rage around her. Her ribs were broken. Her throat felt crushed. Her arm was bleeding, but she was alive. She crawled over to the dying man, checked his pockets. No ID, but that was expected. Just a satellite phone and a folded photograph. She took both. The mercenary was staring at her, his face going pale as his blood pressure dropped. You're Wraith." His accent was fading, replaced by something else. American. Midwest, maybe. "Julian said you'd be faster." Kira froze. "You know Julian?" "He's watching from the minaret. Said to tell you." The man coughed blood. "He's sorry for everything." Then he was gone. Kira looked east. There, silhouetted against the sky 400 yards away, a figure stood on the mosque minaret, watching. Even at this distance, she recognized the posture. Julian. He raised one hand. Not a wave, not a salute, just acknowledgement. Then he turned and disappeared into the building. Kira didn't chase him, couldn't chase him. She had a mission to complete, a team to save. "Later," she whispered. "We'll finish this later." She pocketed the photo and picked up the mercenary's rifle. a pristine HK-416 with a holographic sight and a full magazine. She checked the chamber, loaded and ready. Her earpiece crackled. "Ashford, what's your status? We heard gunfire." "Threat neutralized, Chief. I'm coming home." "Copy, but you better hurry. The sky's about to fall." Kira stood up, every movement sending daggers through her broken ribs. She looked east, toward Stone's position. 2 blocks. Might as well be 2 miles. But she'd made it this far. And she'd be damned if she died 2 blocks from salvation. She started moving, the HK-416 at the ready, limping through the compound like a ghost returning to haunt the living. The run back was a blur of violence and desperation. The enemy fighters, realizing their communications were dead and their ambush was crumbling, were pouring into the streets. They fired at anything that moved, desperate, panicked. Kira moved through the chaos like smoke. She used the alleys, the shadows. Every time a target presented itself, the HK-416 barked twice. Double tap, move. Double tap, move. Controlled aggression, the kind you learned after your 100th firefight. She was 1 block away from Stone's position when the sound changed. The staccato pop of small arms fire was drowned out by a low, tearing sound in the sky. It sounded like canvas being ripped by the hands of God. Fast movers. 2 F-16 Vipers screamed overhead, so low Kira could see the rivets on their wings. They banked hard, afterburners painting contrails across the cloudless sky. "Good hunting," she muttered. The jets leveled out. A moment later, the earth shook. 2 500-pound JDAM bombs slammed into the enemy mortar positions on the north side of the compound. The explosion was a physical punch to the gut, a pressure wave that made her teeth rattle. A mushroom cloud of dust and debris rose, blocking out the sun. Kira used the confusion to sprint across the final open street. She dove through the broken door of Stone's position, landing in a heap at the chief's feet. "You're late," Stone grunted, though the relief in his eyes was palpable. He reached down and hauled her up. "Traffic was murder," Kira quipped, checking her gear. "Status, jammer destroyed. 1 mercenary KIA. I have his rifle and sat phone." "And Chief," she paused, her expression darkening, "this wasn't Taliban. This was a professional operation. American equipment. American tactics." "CIA?" Stone's jaw tightened. "Or someone pretending to be. Either way, we have bigger problems." She handed him the sat phone. "Check the messages." Stone scrolled through the device, his expression growing darker with each line he read. Finally, he looked up, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw genuine fear in his eyes. Jesus Christ, this whole thing was a setup. The mission, the intel, everything. Someone wanted us dead. He showed her the screen. A text message sent 12 hours ago. "Vulture to Griffin. $4 million on Wraith termination. SEAL team collateral acceptable. No witnesses." Kira felt the world tilt. "Griffin? That's Julian Graves' call sign. My old partner. The one who was supposed to be dead." "Was supposed to be?" "I heard his voice on the radio in the tower. Stone, he's alive. And he's here. And he's hunting me." She looked at the sat phone again. "But that mercenary said something before he died. Said Julian was watching from the minaret. Said Julian told him to tell me he was sorry." Stone studied her face. "You saw him?" "For about 3 seconds. Then he disappeared." Kira's voice was tight. "I don't know if he's trying to kill me or trying to help me. Maybe both." Before Stone could respond, the satellite phone in his hand buzzed. An incoming call. The screen showed no caller ID, just an encrypted number. Kira and Stone looked at each other. Then she nodded. Stone answered on speaker. "Who is this?" A voice came through, smooth and confident, American, educated, the kind of voice that gave orders and expected them to be followed. "Chief Stone, my name is Vincent Crow. I'm a senior officer with the Central Intelligence Agency, Special Activities Division. I believe you have something that belongs to me." And what would that be? A woman named Kira Ashford, though you might know her better as Wraith. Kira's hands clenched into fists. She knew that voice, had heard it 3 years ago in a debriefing room, telling her that Julian was dead and that she needed to retire for her own safety. She's standing right here, Stone said. You want to tell me why you sent 50 fighters to kill a medical contractor? Come now, Chief. We both know Miss Ashford is much more than a medical contractor. She's a ghost, a very dangerous ghost who knows things she shouldn't, things that could embarrass certain people in certain agencies. Like what? Like the fact that in 2008, I ran a very profitable side business moving cocaine through the Sinaloa cartel. Miss Ashford and her partner stumbled onto my operation during a routine reconnaissance. They became problematic. Stone's eyes widened. You're admitting to drug trafficking? I'm admitting nothing that can be proven, Chief. You see, everyone who could testify against me is either dead or about to be. Julian Graves, Miss Ashford's former partner, has been very helpful in that regard. He's quite motivated, having spent 18 months in a cartel torture chamber because of her. Kira grabbed the phone. Julian's alive? Where is he? Closer than you think, Wraith. He's been tracking you since you landed. And unlike me, his motivations are personal. I'm just paying him to clean up loose ends. He's doing it because he wants to watch you suffer. You son of a... Language, Miss Ashford. You're on government property. Crow's voice remained calm, almost amused. Here's what's going to happen. In approximately 3 minutes, another airstrike is going to level that building you're hiding in. Tragic accident. Bad coordinates. It happens in war. You, Chief Stone, and his entire team will be casualties of combat. Posthumous medals all around. You can't call in airstrikes on American forces. Stone's voice was raw with fury. Actually, Chief, I can. I control the Joint Terminal Attack Controller for this entire sector. And right now he's entering coordinates that will turn your position into a crater. Unless what? Unless Miss Ashford surrenders herself to me. She comes out, hands up, no weapons. My people take her into custody. The rest of you go home. Live to fight another day. It's a generous offer, considering. Kiera looked at Stone, looked at Tyler Bennett, pale and sweating on the floor. At Marcus Hale, his ammunition nearly exhausted. At the unconscious co-pilot who'd never asked to be part of any of this. She knew what she had to do. Ashford, no. Stone's voice was hard. We don't negotiate with terrorists. That's what this asshole is. A terrorist in a suit. Chief, if I don't go out there, you all die. If you do go out there, you die. And we still might die anyway. Men like Crow don't leave witnesses. Crow's voice came through the speaker again. 2 minutes, Miss Ashford. Decide quickly. Martyrdom is very noble, but death is quite permanent. Kiera reached for the phone, but Stone pulled it away. His eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, something passed between them. Understanding. Trust. The kind of bond that forms when you've bled beside someone. No, Stone said simply. Then he raised the satellite phone to his mouth. Crow? Chief Stone, here's my counter-offer. Go fuck yourself. He ended the call. Kira stared at him. Chief, he's going to... I know what he's going to do. But we're not rolling over for some CIA drug smuggler. We fight. That's what we do. Marcus Hale chambered around in his SAW. Hoo-ah, Chief. Tyler Bennett, despite his broken leg, pulled his sidearm. If I'm dying, I'm taking some of these bastards with me. Kira felt something break inside her chest. Not her ribs, though those were definitely broken. Something deeper. The wall she'd built between Kira Ashford the nurse and Wraith the operator. It crumbled, and what emerged was neither one nor the other, but something new. Then we need a plan, she said, and we need it fast. Stone checked his watch. We have 90 seconds before those F-16s come back. What do you got? Kira pulled out the mercenary's sat phone. her mind racing through options and discarding them as quickly as they formed. Then she saw it, the message log, the encrypted number Crow had called from, and beneath it a list of previous calls. To CENTCOM, to Bagram Tower, to the JTAC who was currently entering the coordinates to kill them. Stone, what if we bypass Crow entirely, go straight to the top? How? This phone has direct access to Central Command. I can call the duty officer, identify myself as ISA, and upload these text messages as evidence. Once CENTCOM sees that a CIA officer is calling in strikes on American forces, they'll shut down the entire operation. Stone's eyes widened. That's insane. You'll be going over the head of the entire CIA. You have a better idea? No, do it. Kira's fingers flew over the sat phone screen. She dialed the CENTCOM duty officer number from memory, praying it hadn't changed in 3 years. 1 ring, 2 rings. CENTCOM watch floor, this is Captain Martinez. Captain, this is ISA operator Kiera Ashford, serial number 37729-851. I have urgent priority traffic regarding unauthorized strike on American forces. Authenticate code Tango Whiskey 59er. A pause. Stand by for authentication check. 30 seconds. The longest 30 seconds of Kiera's life. Then, authentication confirmed. Go ahead with your traffic, Operator Ashford. Captain, be advised, CIA Officer Vincent Crow, Special Activities Division, has compromised the JTAC for Kunar Province. He is currently directing airstrikes on friendly forces to eliminate witnesses to his criminal activities. I am uploading evidence now. She hit send on the sat phone, transmitting the message log. Every text, every order, every piece of evidence that Crow had been running a drug operation and was now trying to cover it up with murder. Evidence received, Captain Martinez said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Stand by. They heard voices in the background, shouting, someone demanding to see a commanding officer immediately. Then a different voice came on the line, older, authority wrapped in gravel. This is Major General Blackwood, CENTCOM Deputy Commander. Operator Ashford, is this intel actionable? Yes, sir. CIA Officer Crow attempted to have American forces killed in Kunar Province to cover up his drug trafficking operations. We have sat phone evidence, text message records, and multiple witnesses. Location of your unit? Stone rattled off the grid coordinates. Received. All CAS operations in Kunar Province are suspended immediately. Redirecting air assets to your location for proper close air support. ETA 4 minutes. The general's voice turned cold. And someone get me Vincent Crow on the line. Now. Stone looked at Kira. What about Masood, the warlord we were supposed to extract? Kira shook her head, scrolling through more messages on the sat phone. Check this. Crow to Griffin, dated 3 days ago. Masood neutralized. Body disposed. Use compound as bait. Marcus swore under his breath. The mission was fake from the start. There was no rescue, just us walking into a kill box. Crow needed a reason to get me to Afghanistan, Kira said quietly. Masood was just the cover story, and we were all expendable. The call ended. Stone let out a breath he'd been holding. You just went over the heads of the entire CIA to a 2-star general. Desperate times, Chief. You know what this means? You're either getting a Medal of Honor or a court-martial. Maybe both. I'll take my chances. The F-16s came back, but this time, they were on the right side. The bombs fell on enemy positions, tearing apart the fighters who'd been massing for a final assault. The buildings shook with each impact, but Stone was grinning now. That's the sound of justice, Ashford. Beautiful, isn't it? 10 minutes later, a Pavehawk helicopter descended into the compound, its door gunners laying down suppressive fire. The team loaded up, Tyler and the co-pilot on stretchers, Marcus and Stone limping, Kira moving like she'd been hit by a truck because she essentially had. As they lifted off, banking away from the Valley of Death, Kira looked down at the compound, at the bodies, at the smoke, at the place where she'd been forced to become Wraith again. Stone sat beside her, keying his headset so she could hear him over the rotors. "You okay?" Kira opened her eyes. They were wet. "I will be." Stone looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a patch. Not regulation. Unofficial. A skull and crossbones with a halo drawn over it in silver thread. The Bravo team patch, but modified. He pressed it into her hand. "The boys took a vote while you were gone. You're Bravo team now. Honorary. And we figured Wraith was your old life. You need a new call sign." Kira looked at the patch, touched the embroidered halo. "What do you have in mind?" "Saint, because you performed a miracle today. Saved all our lives. But you had to wade through hell to do it." Kira closed her fingers around the patch. For the first time in 3 years, she felt something like peace. "Saint," she repeated. "I think I can live with that." The helicopter banked toward Bagram, leaving the valley behind. But the story was far from over. The adrenaline crash hit Kira somewhere over the Hindu Kush Mountains, 30,000 feet above sea level, where the air was thin and cold. It didn't come all at once. It came in waves, each one worse than the last. First, the shaking. Her hands trembled so badly she had to clasp them together to hide it from Stone. Then the nausea, her stomach twisting into knots as her nervous system tried to process 4 hours of combat that should have killed her 3 times over. Finally, the cold sweats, her body temperature dropping as the shock set in. Stone saw it happening. He'd been doing this long enough to recognize the signs. He moved beside her, said nothing, just put a steady hand on her shoulder. The weight was grounding, real, a reminder that she was still alive, still breathing, still here. Tyler Bennett was unconscious, pumped full of morphine, his legs splinted and stabilized. The co-pilot was awake now, groggy but functional, thanking Kira every few minutes until she wanted to scream at him to stop. Marcus Hale sat in silence, cleaning his weapon with a kind of focused intensity that meant he was processing his own demons. They landed at Bagram Airfield as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of orange and red that looked like the world was on fire. Medical teams swarmed the Pavehawk before the rotors stopped spinning, pulling Tyler and the co-pilot onto gurneys and rushing them toward the trauma bay. Kira tried to follow, but a young MP stepped in front of her. He couldn't have been more than 22, and he looked terrified of her. Her scrubs were soaked with blood, some hers, most not. Her face was bruised, her arm bandaged with combat gauze, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. She looked like exactly what she was, a killer wearing a nurse's uniform. "Ma'am," the MP said, his voice cracking slightly, "I need you to come with me. My patients need—" "The SEAL team is being debriefed separately. You're being separated." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Separated. It meant she wasn't part of the team, wasn't one of them, was something else entirely. A liability. A problem to be solved. Stone appeared at her elbow. "Separated where, son?" "I'm sorry, Chief. I have orders. Miss Ashford needs to come with me. Now." Stone's jaw clenched. He looked at Kira, and in his eyes she saw frustration, anger, and something that might have been respect. "I'll fix this," he said quietly. "Whatever they're planning, I'll fix it." Kira nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. If she opened her mouth, she might start screaming and never stop. The MP led her away from the landing pad, away from the medical facilities, away from anything that looked remotely friendly. They walked for 10 minutes through the sprawling base, past rows of containerized housing units and vehicle maintenance bays, until they reached a nondescript building with no windows and one reinforced door. The box. Every forward operating base had one. The place where they put people who needed to be isolated, questioned, or disappeared. Inside, the temperature dropped 20 degrees. The interrogation room was sterile, painted in shades of beige that made you forget what color actually looked like. A metal table, 2 chairs, a mirror that was obviously two-way glass. The fluorescent lights buzzed with that frequency that burrowed into your skull and nested there. They took her weapons, took her medical ruck, even took the saint patch Stone had given her, bagging it as evidence. Then they left her alone. 3 hours. No water, no food, no information. Just Kira and the hum of the air conditioning and her own reflection in the mirror, looking like a stranger she used to know. She knew the tactic: sensory deprivation, isolation, make the subject anxious, uncertain, compliant. She'd used it herself, back when she wore a different uniform and asked questions that didn't have pleasant answers. So she closed her eyes and focused on her breathing. 4 counts in, hold for 4. 4 counts out, hold for 4. The box breathing technique they taught snipers to steady their heart rate before a shot. It worked just as well for surviving bureaucratic torture. The lock clicked. 2 men entered. The first was a Navy commander, tall and thin, with the kind of face that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts by someone who'd never seen a human smile. His name tag read Sterling. He carried a laptop and an expression of profound disapproval. The second man was different, older, maybe 52, wearing a suit that cost more than Kira's car. No name tag, no uniform, no insignia. He moved with the predatory grace of someone who owned every room he entered, whether invited or not. CIA had to be. Sterling remained standing, using his height to loom over her. Psychological dominance, amateur hour. Miss Ashford, I am Commander Sterling, Judge Advocate General's office. This is Agent Crow. We are recording this session. Kira felt her blood turn to ice. Crow, Vincent Crow, the voice on the satellite phone. The man who'd tried to kill them all. And he was here, in this room, looking at her like she was a problem to be solved with a signature on the right form. Crow pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, his movements deliberate, controlled. Miss Ashford, or should I call you Wraith? I confess, I'm not sure which version of you I'm speaking to right now. My name is Kira Ashford, she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline spiking through her system. I'm a registered nurse. I was hired as a medical contractor for a DoD operation in Afghanistan. A medical contractor, Sterling repeated, opening his laptop, who killed 13 enemy combatants, operated military weapon systems, and coordinated airstrikes. That's quite a resume for someone who's supposed to be changing bedpans. I did what was necessary to save American lives. What you did, Miss Ashford, was violate your contract. Your agreement with the Department of Defense explicitly states that you are a non-combatant medical specialist. You are authorized to use force only in immediate self-defense. Sterling leaned forward, his face tight with righteous anger. Yet, according to drone footage and audio intercepts, you engaged in offensive operations. You infiltrated an enemy position. You destroyed communications equipment. You killed a foreign national with what can only be described as professional precision. That foreign national was a mercenary who had a weapon pointed at my chest. If I hadn't stopped him, I'd be dead. So would Chief Stone and his entire team. Sterling slammed his hand on the table. The man you killed was a British citizen. His government is asking questions. The State Department is asking questions. And I have video of you severing his femoral artery with trauma shears. That's not self-defense, Miss Ashford. That's assassination technique. Crow held up a hand, silencing Sterling. When he spoke, his voice was soft, textured like velvet wrapped around broken glass. Sterling is right about the technique. That wasn't a panic kill. That was a professional kill. The kind of thing they teach at Fort Bragg to people with very specific skill sets. He opened a manila folder and slid a photograph across the table. Grainy, taken from a drone. Kiera standing on a rooftop holding an HK-416, looking down at the mercenary's body. We have a problem, Kira. May I call you Kiera? Crow didn't wait for an answer. The British government wants answers about their citizen. The DoD wants answers about why a nurse was leading a SEAL team, and Commander Sterling here wants to charge you with violating the rules of engagement, possibly even court-martial you. Strip your nursing license, maybe send you to Leavenworth for a very long time. Kiera leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. So what's the play? You didn't bring me here to read me my rights. You came here to make a deal. Crow smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Smart. You always were smart. That's what made you so valuable back when you worked for me. Back in Juarez. The room went very still. I never worked for you, Kiera said quietly. Didn't you? ISA answers to CIA on most operations. I was your handler for the Juarez mission. The one where you discovered my little side business. The one where your partner got captured and you ran away to save yourself. Sterling looked confused. What side business? Crow kept his eyes on Kiera. In 2008, I was running a very profitable operation moving cocaine through the Sinaloa cartel. Call it entrepreneurial initiative. Miss Ashford and her partner, Julian Graves, stumbled onto my operation during routine surveillance. They became problematic, so I arranged for Graves to be captured by cartel enforcers. Told Miss Ashford he was a traitor, that she needed to escape alone. Told her he was dead. He leaned forward, his smile widening. But Julian didn't die, did he? He spent 18 months in a cartel torture chamber. 18 months of being broken down, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of the man he used to be. And the whole time he believed you had abandoned him, that you'd left him to rot while you went back to your comfortable life in the States. Kiera felt tears burning behind her eyes. She refused to let them fall. You told me he was dead. You showed me casualty reports. I forged them. It's surprisingly easy when you have the right clearances. And when Julian finally escaped and came looking for answers, I had a proposition for him. Work for me. Hunt down the woman who left him behind. Get paid handsomely for it. He took the deal. Wouldn't you? So this whole mission was what? Revenge? No, Kiera. This mission was cleanup. You and Julian were loose ends from Juarez. Witnesses who could testify about my operation. I needed both of you dead. So I arranged this little rescue mission, made sure the Taliban knew exactly when and where you'd be landing, and sat back to watch you kill each other. Sterling was staring at Crow now, his face pale. You're admitting to drug trafficking? To arranging the deaths of American service members? Crow turned to him, his expression hardening. I'm admitting nothing that can be proven, Commander. Everyone who could testify against me is conveniently dead. The British mercenary, dead. The Taliban fighters, dead. And Julian Graves. He looked back at Kiera. Well, Julian is currently unaccounted for, but I'm sure he'll turn up eventually. These things have a way of resolving themselves. The SEAL team knows, Kiera said. Stone knows. They'll testify. Will they? Chief Stone is a decorated veteran 2 years from retirement. Marcus Hale has a family. Tyler Bennett is 28 years old, with his whole life ahead of him. Do you really think they'll risk everything to testify about something they can't prove? About allegations from a disgraced contractor who violated her contract and killed 13 people. Crow stood up, buttoning his jacket. Here's what's going to happen, Kiera. Sterling is going to drop all charges against you. The British government will be told their citizen was an enemy combatant killed in action. The whole incident will be classified so deep that even God would need a security clearance to read about it. And in exchange, you're going to work for me again. CIA Ghost Program. Wet work. The kind of operations that never happened, conducted by people who don't officially exist. And if I refuse, then Sterling prosecutes you. You spend the rest of your life in a military prison. Your nursing license is revoked. Your service record is marked with a dishonorable discharge. Everything you've worked for, everything you've tried to become, erased. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. The nurse dies, Kiera. One way or another. The only question is whether Wraith gets to live. Before Kira could respond, the heavy steel door didn't just open. It slammed against the stopper with a sound like a gunshot. Chief Garrett Stone hobbled into the room on crutches, his right ankle wrapped in a walking boot. He was still wearing his combat fatigues, blood-stained and dusty, and his eyes were bloodshot with exhaustion and rage. Behind him, Marcus Hale filled the doorway, arms crossed, daring the two MPs in the hallway to try and stop him. "Chief Stone," Sterling sputtered, his face turning red. "This is a classified debriefing. You are under direct orders to remain in the medical ward. You are in violation of—" "And you are harassing my operator," Stone growled, limping to the table. He threw a stack of papers down in front of Crow. "After action report. Signed by me, by Hale, by Bennett from his hospital bed, and by the co-pilot. All of us testifying that Kira Ashford was deputized under Article 9 of the Field Command Manual. Exigent circumstances. The chain of command was broken, and tactical authority was transferred to the most qualified asset on the ground." "That's absurd," Sterling said. "A contractor cannot assume command of a SEAL team." "She wasn't a contractor in that valley, Commander." Stone's voice was hard as granite. "She was an ISA operator conducting emergency defensive operations against a hostile force. She saved 7 American lives. If you try to prosecute her, if you try to put even one black mark on her record, I will burn this command structure to the ground." Sterling laughed nervously. "Chief, be careful. That sounds like a threat." "It's a promise." Stone turned to Crow, and something in his eyes made the CIA officer step back. "And you, I know who you are, what you are. I did some digging while you were flying in from Langley. Made some calls to old friends, friends in CENTCOM, friends in the Senate Intelligence Committee, friends who are very interested in hearing about a CIA officer running drugs through Mexico and ordering hits on American service members." Crow's calm facade cracked slightly. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Stone pulled out the satellite phone. "This is the phone Ashford recovered from your mercenary. It has every text message you sent, every order, every payment confirmation, already uploaded to 3 separate servers, with instructions to release everything if anything happens to me or my team." He leaned on his crutches, bringing himself eye level with Crow. "You want to play hardball with Navy SEALs? We invented hardball. We play for keeps." The room went silent. Crow stared at Stone, then at the phone, calculating odds and outcomes. His eyes flicked to Kira, and she saw something there she hadn't seen before. Fear. "If you release that," Crow said quietly, "you'll start a war between DOD and CIA that will tear apart every covert operation in the Middle East. Then I suggest you make this right, now." Crow was silent for a long moment. Then he started laughing, a low, dry sound like wind through dead leaves. "You SEALs, so dramatic, so loyal. It's almost admirable." He picked up his folder and tucked it under his arm. "Sterling, drop all charges against Miss Ashford. Classify the entire operation. The incident in Kunar province never happened. It was a training accident. The British mercenary died of natural causes, specifically a sudden drop in blood pressure caused by catastrophic judgment failure." "But sir, I said drop it." Crow's voice turned to ice, and Sterling flinched. Crow walked to the door, then stopped. He turned back to Kira, and for a moment, the mask slipped. She saw the real Vincent Crow underneath. Not the smooth CIA officer, but something far more dangerous. "You have good friends, Miss Ashford. That's rare in our line of work." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a matte black business card. No name, no logo, just an encrypted QR code and a phone number. "The offer stands. The world is getting darker. We need people who can see in the dark. If you ever get bored of being a hero, call me. Come be a ghost again." He set the card on the table and walked out. Sterling glared at them, grabbed his laptop, and followed. The door closed, leaving Kira and Stone alone in the interrogation room. Stone let out a breath he'd been holding and slumped into the chair Sterling had vacated. His ankle was clearly killing him, but he'd walked across the base on it anyway. For her. "You okay, Chief?" Kira asked, her voice soft. "My ankle is throbbing like a bass drum, and I think I just tanked my chances of making Master Chief." Stone rubbed his face with both hands. "But I'd do it again. You saved our lives. That counts for something. You lied in that report. Article 9 doesn't cover contractors. I'm a SEAL, Ashford. I lie for a living. I break things and I protect my team." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. The Saint patch. The one the MPs had bagged as evidence. He'd stolen it back. He slid it across the table to her. "The boys want you to have this. Official vote. You're Bravo team now. Honorary member." Kira picked up the patch, feeling the embroidered skull and halo under her fingers. "I wanted to leave this life behind, Stone. I became a nurse to save people, not kill them. And today you did both. That's not weakness, Ashford. That's strength." Stone stood up slowly, wincing. "The greatest operators I know aren't purely one thing. They're the sum of everything they've been. Healer, fighter, both at once when the world demands it." He moved to the door, then paused. "ISA is offering you full reinstatement. Your old position, your old rank, clean record." "And Julian?" Stone pulled out the satellite phone, scrolling through the message history. "Timeline is interesting. 3 hours before you hit the water tower, Julian sent Crow a message. Need confirmation on Wraith's exact location. Standard tracker talk. But then," Stone scrolled further, 30 minutes before your rooftop fight, he sent another message. 3 words. Contract is void." Kira's eyes widened. "He called off the hit?" "More than that. That British mercenary you killed? He was carrying this sat phone with all of Crow's orders because Julian planted it on him. Julian wanted you to find it. He couldn't face you. Too much pain, too much history. But he made sure you'd have what you needed to take down Crow." Stone's voice softened. "That was his apology, Ashford. His way of saying he was sorry for everything." "Where is he now?" "Unknown. He disappeared after the firefight. Could be dead. Could be in the wind. But if he's alive, he's running from the same people you are." Kira stood up, tucking the Saint patch into her pocket. "What happens now?" "Now? You heal. You decide what kind of person you want to be. Nurse, operator, or something in between." Stone opened the door. "For what it's worth, I think you're already figuring it out." He left, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Kira was alone again, but this time it felt different. Not isolation, more like space to breathe. She looked at the black card Crow had left, at the Saint patch Stone had returned, at her own reflection in the two-way mirror. 3 years ago, she tried to bury Wraith and become someone else. But maybe that was the wrong approach. Maybe the answer wasn't to choose between the killer and the healer, but to integrate them. To accept that she was both, and that both were necessary. She picked up Crow's card, walked to the corner of the room where she knew the camera was mounted, and held it up so whoever was watching could see clearly. Then she tore it in half. The message was clear. She wasn't going to be Crow's weapon. Not now. Not ever. But she wasn't going back to being just a nurse either. She was something new, something the world hadn't seen before. She was the Saint. 3 days later, Kira received a package at her BOQ in Bagram. No return address. Inside, a worn notebook, pages filled with handwriting she recognized instantly. Julian's field journal from his 18 months in captivity. The entries were sparse. Dates, locations, names of cartel enforcers. And on the final page, dated 2 weeks ago, K. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Mexico, maybe. Somewhere Crow's reach doesn't extend. I spent 3 years hating you. 3 years planning revenge. But when I had you in my sights on that rooftop, I couldn't do it. Not because I forgave you. I'm not there yet. Maybe I never will be. But because I remembered who we used to be. Before Juarez, before Crow, when we actually believed we were the good guys. I'm giving you the evidence because someone needs to stop him. And because you're still Wraith. You'll finish the mission. You always do. Don't look for me. I'm a ghost now. Really this time. Jay. Kira closed the journal. Her hands were steady. She didn't cry. She'd done enough crying. She walked to the burn pit behind the base perimeter and dropped the notebook into the flames. Not to destroy evidence, she'd already photographed every page, but because Julian had asked to become a ghost, and the kindest thing she could do for a ghost was to let him disappear. She watched the pages curl and blacken, smoke rising into the Afghan sky. "Goodbye, Griffin," she whispered. "I hope you find peace." The notebook burned to ash, and with it, the last physical connection to the man Julian Graves had been before the world broke him. 1 year later, Kira sat in a small office in Langley, Virginia, reviewing a file marked with enough classification warnings to give most people a security clearance heart attack. Her office was Spartan: a desk, a chair, a computer with more encryption than most nuclear facilities. And on the wall, 2 photographs. The first was Julian Graves in his ISA uniform, young and whole, before Juarez had broken him. Beneath it, a simple inscription, "In memory." The second was newer: Chief Garrett Stone, Marcus Hale, Tyler Bennett, and Kira herself, taken at Bagram 3 days after the firefight. Tyler was in a wheelchair, grinning despite the pain. Marcus had his arm around Stone's shoulders, and Kira was wearing the saint patch, looking directly at the camera with eyes that had seen hell and decided to fight back. Her title now was Inspector, CIA, Office of Inspector General. Internal Affairs. She hunted corrupt officers, people like Vincent Crow, who'd used their positions for personal profit and left bodies in their wake. Crow himself was currently serving 25 years in a federal supermax facility, convicted of drug trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, and treason. His trial had been closed to the public, but the Senate Intelligence Committee had made sure he'd never see daylight again. There was a knock on her door. "Come in." A young woman entered, maybe 23, with the nervous energy of someone who just graduated from the CIA training program and still believed the agency stood for truth and justice. She had dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun and eyes that hadn't yet seen the things that would keep her awake at night. "Ma'am, you wanted to see me?" "Sit down, Reeves." Kira gestured to the chair across from her desk. "You're being assigned to my unit. Before we start, I need to know something. Why did you join the CIA?" The young woman straightened in her chair. "To serve my country, ma'am. To protect Americans from threats they'll never know about." "Good answer. Here's the truth. This job will break you. You'll see things that make you question everything you believe in. You'll meet people who wear the flag on their shoulder and corruption in their hearts. And someday you'll have to choose between following orders and doing what's right." Kira leaned forward. "When that day comes, I need to know you'll make the hard choice." "I will, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. Makes me feel old. It's Kira." She stood up, extending her hand. "Welcome to Internal Affairs. We're the people who clean up the messes nobody wants to acknowledge exist. It's not glamorous, it's not exciting, but it matters. And if you stick with it, I'll teach you everything I know." The young analyst shook her hand, and Kira saw something of herself in those eager eyes. The belief that one person could make a difference. The conviction that justice mattered. She hoped this one would keep that belief longer than she had. After the analyst left, Kira returned to her desk. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Just 2 words. "Thank you." She stared at the screen for a long moment. The number wasn't in her contacts, wasn't traceable, but somehow she knew who'd sent it. Julian. Alive. Out there somewhere. Maybe running. Maybe hiding. maybe trying to rebuild a life from the shattered pieces Crow had left him with. She typed a response, "Stay safe, Griffin." Then she deleted it without sending. Some ghosts were better left alone. Instead, she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a worn photograph. The one from Juarez, the one she'd torn in half. She'd taped it back together, the seam running through the middle like a scar that would never fully heal. Wraith and Griffin, partners, friends, two people who'd trusted each other with their lives until the world had torn them apart. She placed the photograph back in the drawer, closed it gently, and returned to her work. There were files to review, investigations to launch, corrupt officers to hunt. The work never ended. The fight never stopped. But for the first time in 3 years, Kira Ashford wasn't running from who she used to be. She'd learned to carry the weight of both identities. The nurse who saved lives, the operator who took them, the healer and the killer, integrated into something stronger than either alone. She was the saint, and she had work to do. Outside her window, the Virginia sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. In the distance, a plane took off from Reagan National Airport, banking east, toward wars that would never be acknowledged and battles that would never be won. Somewhere out there, people were suffering, dying, waiting for someone to care enough to fight for them. And Kira would be there, not as Wraith, not as just a nurse, but as something new, a guardian with blood on her hands and healing in her heart. A saint forged in the fires of hell, who'd learned that the greatest act of mercy was sometimes also the hardest act of violence. She picked up her phone and dialed Chief Stone's number. He answered on the second ring. "Ashford, it's been a while. How's the new job?" "Keeping me busy. Listen, I'm putting together a training program for new analysts, teaching them how to spot corruption before it metastasizes. Thought you might want a guest lecture, share some war stories." Stone chuckled. "You want an old SEAL to teach CIA analysts about ethics? That's rich. I want someone they'll respect, someone who's been in the shit and came out the other side with their integrity intact. That's you, Stone. When do you need me?" "Next month. I'll send details." "I'll be there. How are you doing, really?" Kira looked at the photograph on her wall, at the faces of the team who'd trusted her when she was nothing but a stranger in scrubs. "I'm doing good, Chief. Better than I've been in a long time." "Good. You earned it. Stay dangerous, Ashford. Always." She hung up and returned to her files. There was a name that kept appearing in multiple investigations, a pattern of suspicious deaths, botched operations, and money disappearing into offshore accounts. Someone high up in the agency was dirty, and they were good at covering their tracks. But Kira had been trained by the best. She knew how to hunt ghosts, because she'd been one herself. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the office grew dark. But Kira didn't turn on the lights. She sat in the shadows, reviewing files, connecting dots, building the case that would eventually bring another corrupt officer to justice. This was her calling now. Not operating in foreign countries, not saving lives in emergency rooms, but something that combined both skill sets into a unique form of justice. She was hunting monsters, the ones who wore suits and spoke with authority and committed their crimes with signatures instead of bullets. And she was very, very good at it, because she knew how monsters thought. She'd been one, once upon a time, when the mission required it. But she'd also been a healer, dedicated to preserving life. Now she was both, the saint, walking the line between light and darkness, understanding that sometimes the only way to protect the innocent was to embrace the violence you'd tried to leave behind. Her computer pinged with a new file. Eyes only, maximum classification. She opened it, scanned the contents, felt her jaw tighten. Another operation compromised, another team in danger, another corrupt officer playing games with American lives. Kira stood up, grabbed her jacket, and headed for the door. She had a meeting with the Director of National Intelligence in 30 minutes. Time to start another hunt. As she walked through the halls of Langley, past portraits of former directors and memorial walls for fallen officers, she caught her reflection in a window. For a moment, she saw both versions of herself superimposed. The nurse in scrubs, the operator in black. Kira and Wraith merged into something new. The saint smiled back at her. And somewhere in the world, someone who thought they were untouchable, who believed their crimes would stay buried forever, felt a chill run down their spine without knowing why. Because the saint was coming, and she always kept her promises. The story of Kira Ashford, the nurse who became an operator, who became a hunter of monsters, was far from over. It was just beginning. And in the shadowy world of intelligence and covert operations, her legend would grow. They would speak of her in whispers in the halls of power. The woman who couldn't be bought, who couldn't be intimidated, who'd walk through hell and come back with the strength to pull others out. The saint, healer and killer, protector and avenger, the balance between mercy and justice. And she would never stop fighting, because she'd learned the hard way that the price of peace was eternal vigilance. That evil flourished when good people did nothing. That sometimes the greatest act of love was also the hardest act of war. So she fought, not with joy but with grim determination. Not because she wanted to, but because someone had to. And she would keep fighting until her last breath, carrying the weight of every life she'd saved and every life she'd taken, knowing that both were necessary, both were real, and both were part of who she'd become. The saint walked into the director's office, ready to brief him on another investigation, another hunt, another battle in the endless war between those who served and those who betrayed. And in her pocket, she carried the patch with the skull and halo, a reminder of where she'd been and who she'd become. A ghost who learned to walk in the light, a killer who chose to heal, a woman who'd found her calling in the space between darkness and dawn. The saint. And her work was just beginning.